Alright, good afternoon everybody. It's your boy King representing the Football Source, here to recap week 12 of the 2014 college football season. Now I'm going to start things off with the game of the week as number 5 Alabama knocks off number 1 Mississippi State 25-20 due to the great efforts on the defensive side. Now this game pretty much boiled down to the turnovers. 3 interceptions thrown by quarterback Dak Prescott of the Bulldogs. That was the major difference maker of this matchup compared to 0 turnovers from Alabama. Dak Prescott had a couple of interceptions where I just thought he made a poor decisions in throwing the football. Now one of the interceptions was, and which was his final interception, it was due to a deflection based on a great play on the defensive line from Alabama. But still, with the first 2 interceptions, those were question marks on the throws that he decided to make. Now he had 290 yards passing, 2 touchdown passes, but those 3 crucial interceptions, that's why they pretty much lost. Had he not thrown an interception, that many interceptions, possibly had he thrown only 2 interceptions, Mississippi State probably could have had a road victory. Now for Alabama, they did a great job defensively, and quarterback Blake Sims did a great job managing the offense. Now I told you guys that was one of the keys to the victory for Alabama, is for Blake Sims to just manage the offense. He does not have to do anything spectacular. He only had 211 yards passing and 1 touchdown pass, but 0 interceptions, counting for 0 turnovers overall for Alabama. Now this is a tough loss for Mississippi State, but they are still not out of the playoff come towards the end of the season. We're going to find out tomorrow as far as the rankings. Possibly Mississippi State could still crack the top 5 overall. They did have a close loss on the road at Alabama. Now let's talk about another major upset. Arizona State loses to Oregon State 35-27 due to the brilliant ground attack by running backs Taryn Ward and Storm Woods. Both these 2 players combined for 273 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, a couple big home run plays, and that was why Arizona State lost, because they had a terrible play as far as their ground defense. Oregon State pulled off a great upset. I knew this could have been an upset alert, but I had to go with Arizona State because they have a great team. But now they have a tie between them and Arizona, who barely won over this past weekend, 27-26, due to a late field goal over the Washington Huskies. So that final matchup between Arizona and Arizona State will be determined who will win the South Division and who will play for the Pac-12 championship. Most likely they're going to play against the Oregon Ducks. A couple of other games that I messed up this week, I had to go with Clemson over Georgia Tech, but the Yellow Jackets did a great job defensively, holding the Tigers to just 190 yards of total offense and a 28-6 victory. Another major upset this past week was the Virginia Tech Hokies over number 21 Duke 17-16. A great defensive effort from the Hokies. Very shocking. I thought the Duke Blue Devils was going to do enough to still capitalize that Atlantic Division. And according to what we've seen as far as the standings of the Coastal Division, I apologize, Georgia Tech actually has a little bit of a notch over Duke due to their record and their strength of schedule, even though Duke did beat Georgia Tech early on in the year. Another game that I had lost in a major play by one particular player was Wisconsin running back Melvin Gordon, just leading the Badgers with a 59-24 victory over Nebraska. Now Gordon had an outstanding game, a record-breaking game where he rushed for 408 yards and a bunch of touchdowns. He had a great performance, surpassing an NFL great in LaDainian Tomlinson, in which he had 406 yards rushing against UTEP years ago. Gordon is now the top player who would definitely most likely will get the Doak Walker Award given to the nation's top running back. He has 23 overall touchdowns. He's just under 2,000 yards, and on his pace, he's actually on the great pace to possibly even breaking Barry Sanders' rushing record for a single season. I highly doubt that's going to happen, but it's still possible. He's a great speedster, and because of this performance, he is now my front runner for the top running back. I'm headed towards the 2015 draft because I have one breaking news for the Georgia Bulldogs, who I will talk about next. But sticking with Melvin Gordon, now he is definitely at least my second place player, just behind Marcus Mariota for this year's Heisman. I think the race is now between Melvin Gordon and Mariota. Dak Prescott is pretty much out of the race in my opinion due to the poor performance a little bit against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now I just mentioned you guys, I got to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. Now they edged out Auburn 34-7. Great round attack between Nick Chubbs, the freshman, and Todd Gurley. They both combined for 282 yards rushing and 3 scores. But terrible news for Georgia Bulldog fans, because Todd Gurley just torn his ACL and he will be out for the remainder of the year. Now, he was my #1 running back headed towards this year's draft, despite all the off-the-field issues with the autograph signing and him collecting money from clients that he had to sign autographs for. But now with this torn ACL, I had to put Melvin Gordon above him and above Amir Abdullah from Nebraska. Now, this is a tough break for Todd Gurley, and this is a decision the decision that he has to make come towards the end of the year. Either he can still enter the NFL draft, which I would still put him in my top 3 running backs, or probably stay for his senior season. He might really consider staying for 1 more year. Now, let's talk about some other games. Utah had an overtime thriller against Stanford, in which they won 20-17. Missouri, I called this game correctly, 34-27 victory at Texas A&M. Now, Missouri still controls their own destiny in the SEC East Division. They only have 1 loss in conference play and only 2 games remaining in their schedule, against Tennessee and in that season finale against Arkansas for the Tigers. Now, Arkansas finally pulled off their first SEC victory over this past weekend with a good win over the LSU Tigers. So Arkansas possibly could pull off the upset. I do have Missouri beating Tennessee, but I'm a little bit skeptical about the Arkansas game. Now, the Missouri Tigers still control their own destiny. Now, they are now still the front runners of the SEC East Division and try to make it to the SEC Championship. Big news for my Longhorn fans. They are now bowl eligible with a 28-7 victory over Oklahoma State. And in their final game, they have to face TCU. That's not a pretty match, but they are now bowl eligible. That is great news. Michigan State edged out Maryland 37-15. Great game for the Spartans. And one of the biggest games this week, Florida State at Miami. Now, this was a great thriller in which the Noles won 30-26. And because of this victory, in my personal opinion, I believe that come tomorrow, the Florida State Seminoles should be back at #1 overall above the Oregon Ducks. At number 3, I would probably put Alabama at number 3 due to beating the #1 overall team. At number 4, I would still put TCU, even though they had a tough game against the Kansas Jayhawks. That kind of scared a couple of voters away, but still, I think that the TCU Horned Frogs is still a good team. So my top 4 teams, in my opinion, come tomorrow should be Florida State, Oregon, Alabama, and TCU. This race is still going on forward. Now, we still have a couple of weeks left. Then that big match at the end of the year for Alabama, in that Iron Bowl match against arch rival Auburn, that can determine who will win the SEC West Division, while Mississippi State still has to face Ole Miss, but if Ole Miss loses to Mississippi State and Alabama loses to Auburn, Mississippi State will get the notch for the West Division and make it to the SEC Championship. Now, overall this week, I went 9-6. I'm not really proud of this year. Overall, I'm 96-48 as my overall record. As far as my picks, 66.66% overall. I'm still trying to get to the 75% percentile come towards the end of the year. I got to pretty much be perfect for the remainder of the season, but we still have a lot of season left. Still so excited. Everybody's mainly focused on that SEC conference. This still could be a tough battle in that West Division, and possibly, just possibly, an SEC team might not make it to the playoff if things go bad for Mississippi State and Alabama. But we still have a couple of weeks left. So excited for you guys, and the next time I'm going to catch you guys will be on Thursday, where I will give you my previews for week 13 of this season. Thank you for watching today's blog from the Football Source. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.